Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Forge of Freedom podcast. I'm your host, Alex Ooley, and this is episode 115 of the Forge of Freedom. Today, for Monday Gun Day, I have Mike Ooley back in the studio. Mike, welcome back to the show.
Good morning, Alex.
Good morning. So today we've got a kind of a mixture of topics that we want to cover, a few news topics, and then also at the end, talk a little bit about the NRA, the upcoming NRA Annual Meeting, and also the election that's currently going on with respect to the NRA Board of Directors, and kind of give you an update on that. But to start out, is the topic we're leading off with comes from Indianapolis. And lots of people know that a lot of these big cities around the country have been getting criticized for their soft on crime policies, for sort of taking these bail reform initiatives and letting violent criminals out of jail without much or any bail. But the other side of the coin here is that the same people who are pushing for this sort of soft on crime approach, as particularly with respect to violent crime, are also pushing for people like you and me not to be able to defend ourselves. And in fact, some officials in Indianapolis recently, and this is an article I'm going to put up here on the screen here momentarily, from March 29th, so just a little over a week ago, where the Indianapolis police chief, Marion County prosecutor, and the mayor are concerned about a rise in self-defense cases across the city of Indianapolis. Essentially, what they're saying is we have too much self-defense going on here in our city. And so let me put this article up on the screen here. We'll talk about it. Go through a few of the highlights here from the article. But you can see it's an article from WTHR.com, WTHR News in Indianapolis. And the article is called Indianapolis Police See Rise in Self-Defense Shootings. And I found this article through on X through Amy Swearer, who is with the Heritage Foundation, and she has a lot of great content on her X page, and also that she produces through the Heritage Foundation. So I'll certainly link to her page in the show notes. But one of the first things here, if you're looking through the article, the quote here, it says that, and this is from Prosecutor Ryan Mears in Marion County, which is the county where Indianapolis is situated, says, "What's upsetting to me is if you look at the month of January, I think we had 18 homicides during that month. 14 of those were being investigated for self-defense, meaning that someone lost their life, and that case might be ultimately cleared. But that doesn't do anything for that family who lost someone."
It seems like they're upset that criminals were injured, potentially killed in the commission of a crime.
Yeah, exactly. Like, these criminals should be able, right, to just commit the crime without recourse, right? I mean, just let them do their thing. This sort of dovetails on the topic we discussed last week, right, where we were talking about the situation in Canada. Was it Toronto, where the advice from the officer was, hey, you can prevent home invasions.
Well, you can prevent a violent home invasion where there's a crime committed against you.
Yeah, if you just make it easier for the criminal to commit the crime,
and
just put the key to your car outside your door so that they don't have to come in your house to take your car, right? And so this is along those same lines. Why he's upset that 14 of the 18 homicides in Indianapolis might have been justifiable self-defense. So the implication here, of course, is that the act of self-defense is just as bad as the criminal act that preceded that act of self-defense.
Yeah, and as a matter of fact, last week, this dovetails with that, I think, wonderfully, because what we're seeing, I think, out of Ryan Mears and these clowns in Indianapolis is that is this ebb and flow towards Europe. Because in Europe, by the way, self-defense is looked upon very negatively. I think the attitude is that there's only one entity that should have the right to use lethal force, and that's the government. and they'll be the ultimate arbiter. And by the way, they won't have any duty to protect you. But they don't want the peasants to be able to have the right to defend themselves and use deadly force in defense of their person and their families.
Yeah, and like you say, not only do they have the government actors have no duty to protect you, but also if they get it wrong, they have immunity.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
By the way, they're not
right.
responsible for anything.
Right. Whereas you and I, if we get it wrong, we spend years, decades, potentially life in prison.
But they are responsible for one thing, and that's to collect tax money.
Yeah, exactly. So they want the monopoly. The bottom line here is that the government and people like this want a monopoly on the use of force, and that includes against good people like you and I, and of course at the expense of our own ability to protect ourselves and our loved ones. But here, if you go further down the article, he goes on and he says, someone died, but no one was ever charged with a crime. Like, that's a problem. Okay. I mean, this is just, like he said, he's implying that the person who acts in justifiable self-defense we should be able to charge them with a crime. And part of the reason here that there are 18 homicides, 14 of which may have been justifiable self-defense, is that there is an uptick in violent crime, and people have the problem here is that people have to use force and self-defense.
Yeah, and I think this stems from the whole COVID debacle, where Indianapolis was the one of the epicenters of a great deal of looting and rioting and lawlessness, and I think that taught people that government can't protect you in bad times.
Yeah, and he goes on, and this is where we'll stop with this article for now, but I'll link to it so you can go and check it out. And we're sharing this. Obviously, we're in Indiana. This is close to home for us, but this is the sort of attitude that prosecutors, that many police chiefs, that many mayors and governors have nationwide.
Yeah, and by the way, just in defense of Indiana, I mean, this is Indianapolis.
Right.
Most of Indiana is not like this. Okay, so most Hoosiers don't have the attitudes that you see expressed in this article.
Right. Indianapolis is the sort of progressive center of Indiana.
That and then yeah.
But he goes on and he says, so we're just seeing a significant increase in the number of self-defense cases because we're seeing too many situations where both parties are armed. So it'd be better, right, Mike, if it was just the criminal that were armed.
Absolutely.
And we had willing victims.
Well, then the police could come out and just do their report, and we could move on.
Our job would be way easier.
Yeah.
Right. And in fact, let's see if we can find it here. There's a point where he essentially implies that our job's too hard, where there's self-defense is involved. And I don't have the quote here. It may have been in the actual video. But anyway, the point here is not to make the prosecutor's job easier. The point is that we have an inherent right to defend ourselves. We have a property in our own body, and as an extension of that, we have a right to protect it. And prosecutor here disagrees.
Yeah, and I suspect that what will happen eventually is the violent crime rate, it may already be, I don't know, I should have researched this, it will go down, and consistent with John Lott's proposition in his book, More Guns, Less Crime, crime data will go down, and Joe Hogstad, who's the mayor of Indianapolis, and I think, what's his name, Ryan or Brian Mears?
Yeah, Ryan Mears.
Prosecutor, he'll end up taking credit for any decrease that does come. And of course, it won't be because of self-defense or because folks defended themselves and created a deterrent for crime in Indianapolis. It'll be because of some policy of the government.
Of course. Yeah. All right. So that's the article there, again, at WTHR.com. I'll share that in the show notes. Here's the X page for Amy Swearer. It's AMYSWEARER. Like I said, she's with the Heritage Foundation, but she has great content, and she addressed this commentary from the officials in Indianapolis as well, and of course provided several counter examples where, hey, did this woman who fatally shot her boyfriend as he was pummeling the daylights out of her, was she the one that you wanted to be unarmed?
Mm-hmm.
Right?
That's what they want.
Yeah.
And here's the thing, too. I want to say something positive. I mean, I kind of feel bad that we're from Indiana, and what do? We make we talk about the worst amongst us.
Yeah.
But I am thankful for the fact that the Indiana legislature keeps the city of Indianapolis from infringing upon the rights of the folks that live in Indianapolis too much, because we have preemption laws and laws on the books at the state level that prevent folks like Joe Hogstad and that Mears prosecutor from implementing laws that basically would make Indianapolis like a little bastion of East Germany.
Yeah. You mentioned, in closing here on this topic anyway, you mentioned John Lott and his book, More Guns, Less Crime. I'll also mention Paul Lathrop, who's got the Polite Society podcast, which is the name of which is based on this idea that an armed society is a polite society. And the idea, right, is that if you know that the person you're about to victimize is armed or might be armed, then you're less likely to commit a crime against that person. And so thereby, an armed society is a polite society.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I'm going to digress a little bit. We're going to go to the NRA convention in Dallas in sometime May 16th, 17th, 18th, something like that. But I know I've heard Guy Relford talk about this before when the NRA convention was in Indianapolis. So there's this enormous, 70, 80, 90,000 NRA.
Oh, this is actually based on work from John Lott.
Oh, is it? Okay, yeah. Well, you know more about it than I do. That they show up to Indianapolis. And what is the weekend in Indianapolis where there are the fewest violent crimes, and it's the safest weekend to be in Indianapolis? What weekend is it? When 70 or 80,000 people show up with guns.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's consistent with our experience. We've been going to the NRA convention for I don't know how long, years and years, and it is. And by the way, I'm not endorsing some of the things that happened at the NRA over the last few years, but when you go to the NRA convention and you're around the folks there, it is one of the politest groups of folks that you'll ever be around. And almost everybody, I suspect, is armed.
Yeah. Yeah. Think about when you go to a state fair or a county fair and just sort of how it's kind of rude and pushy oftentimes. You go to the NRA annual meeting and it's the most polite group of people, you go into a convention hall full of people and it's not particularly loud. Nobody's pushing at each other. Nobody's cutting in front of line. It's one of the most polite crowds you ever meet. And like you said, consistently during the weekend of the NRA annual meeting, the violent crime rate in the cities where it's being hosted drops.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. So
let's hope we don't jinx anything for Dallas in May, but that's the case.
Exactly. All right, Michael, so that's where we'll leave that for now. This concept that from Ryan Mears that there's too much self-defense. Right? All right, so let's move on to the next topic. This is an article that you brought to my attention. It's a tragic incident in Nashville where a mother accidentally shot and killed her daughter. You want to talk a little bit about that, Mike?
Yeah, and Alex, I think folks that are watching can see this article, and if you're not watching, there's a link to it.
Yeah, it's WSMV.com. It's WSMV News out of Nashville.
Yeah, and this is a tragic event where a mother negligently, and notice I said negligently, you'll see the word accident all through the press, but negligently shot her daughter, a 13-year-old daughter who ultimately died as a result of this incident. And this article, I think, brings out a couple points that just from a safety standpoint, I think it's important to remind people every once in a while. We have lots of safety podcasts or shows, whatever you call these episodes. But one thing that's of particular importance is to make sure, first of all, if you're a female, and I guess in today's world, males may have purses, who knows? But if you have a purse, that's probably not the ideal place to carry a firearm in the first place, simply because, purses a lot of times aren't on your body. You set them down. Somebody trying to rob you may grab your purse first. And I will tell you that, and I don't carry a purse, but from a training perspective, I've tried to draw from a purse or go through that motion. It's very difficult to do, actually, to do safely. So we favor anyway on body carry if you're going to carry a firearm. With that said, though, if you're going to carry in a purse or actually any place else, what happened in this case? I think the couple things I need to point out here. Number one, if you go down to the article, can you scroll down through there, Alex? Maybe?
Yeah, sure. And you'll see here that the subtitle of the article says the mother says the pistol went off while she was attempting to get her keys from her purse.
Yeah, and I'm not trying to make light of this tragedy, but I think we can all learn something here, or it emphasizes a point that we teach and many others do. Number one, she said, I think she says somewhere, I didn't know my gun was loaded in my purse. Okay, and she shot through the bag. What's one of the things that we always preach and we want folks to internalize, and that is we treat all guns as if they're loaded. Now, the gun, we don't say all guns are always loaded because they're not. But we treat all guns as if they're loaded.
Right.
And the reason we do that is because as human beings, at some point in time, we will make a mistake about whether or not a gun is loaded or not. If we treat guns differently when we think they're loaded versus when we think they're unloaded, we'll make that mistake about identifying whether it's loaded or unloaded, and then a tragedy will occur. So always treat all guns all the time as if they're loaded.
Yeah.
Okay?
Many negligent discharges are with quote unquote unloaded guns. People who believe the firearm is unloaded but are wrong about that fact.
And a lot of times, I think statistically what you'll see is people are injured or killed when they're cleaning their guns is another place where they say they're unloaded. There's no, they think there's no ammunition in the area. There is. The other was when folks handle their guns by holstering or reholstering their gun. In a sense, that's what was happening here. She was using her purse as a holster. Mm-hmm. She didn't have the gun in a separate, distinct holster that would have covered the hand guard, or the trigger, and would go around the trigger guard. So she evidently was reaching into her purse. I don't know if she put her finger on the trigger, if a set of keys got caught when she was moving the gun around. I mean, we really don't know what happened in terms of what caused the gun to discharge, except she was engaging in negligent activity at the time in terms of the handling of her gun. So the moral of the story is always treat all guns as if they're loaded. And number two, have a functional, reliable holster that your gun is in all the time to protect that trigger and that trigger guard so that we don't have these sort of negligent discharges.
Yeah. Certainly a tragic incident, but there are certainly good lessons to be learned.
Yeah. And, most of us, and we'll talk about this in a minute, most of us, or a lot of us anyway, when we look at carrying a handgun, we emphasize, which gun we're going to carry, which is better, or, all that sort of thing. But we don't pay a lot of attention to the holsters. And I think it's very important that people invest in a quality holster, do the same amount of research or more on your holster selections as you do your firearm selection. So that holster is an incredibly important safety device that you need to invest a lot of time and effort in.
Well, we always talk about how people place too much emphasis on the equipment, right, and not on the training, because most of firearms training, most of firearms handling, most of self-defense, personal protection should focus on your mind and the skills that you need to protect yourself and to handle a firearm safely. But with that being said, there are certain key components that you should really focus on, and one of those is a holster. Unfortunately, it's difficult to go and look. There aren't that many stores where you can go and look at a lot of different holsters and see how they work, see how they feel. But one great opportunity to look at holsters is what the topic we're going to talk about next, the NRA Annual Meeting.
Yeah.
Right? So the NRA Annual Meeting, for people who don't know, is an event that takes place every year. Obviously, it's in the name, Annual Meeting. But the NRA Board of Directors and leadership meet at this meeting, but among other things, they also have a convention floor with most of the major manufacturers of equipment related to the firearms industry, including holsters. And it's a great place to go and look at, try out different holsters that may fit your lifestyle, right? So that's if you can go to the NRA annual meeting, we would certainly encourage you to go. It's a great opportunity to meet people, to check out great equipment, and to sort out things that you might not be able to find at your local gun store.
Yeah, but you get around gun folks. It's funny. I'll put you on the spot a little bit. You went to an NRA Friends of the NRA banquet last night, and was there more talk about what blaster people were carrying, or was there more talk about what training they'd done in the last year or two, or what they were going to do in the next year or two, or their holster or their belt? What was the topic of discussion amongst these folks?
I heard a discussion of training exactly 0 times from people in attendance. It was all about the equipment, which is always disappointing to me. No, nothing wrong with the equipment. I like it too. It's interesting. It's fun. But the training should be the priority. Fortunately, this event, the Friends of the NRA banquet, is primarily for the purpose of raising funds to train youth and children. So it's a great cause. Unfortunately, a lot of those in attendance focus a little too much on the equipment in my mind.
Yeah, and I wasn't trying to criticize the cause. I was just trying to make the point of what people focus on.
Yeah.
And they focus on it too much.
Yeah.
Exactly. What is it? Somebody said, "Fear the man with one gun."
Yeah.
So
yeah, he might know how to use it, right?
He might know how to use it.
That's the rest of the quote, I think. So anyway, so the NRA annual meeting is coming up soon. There are speaking of training, there are lots of great educational opportunities there. They have conference rooms set up throughout the event with lots of great educational content. Some of the best known instructors, trainers are there and speaking about what we're talking about. What's the proper mindset? What do you need to do to protect yourself, to protect your family? What lessons can be learned from others who have protected themselves and their families?
Yeah, I'm just thinking all of us, one of the things, and you can go to NRA AM and look at the training stuff and the education, but I was thinking of, for instance, one of the trainers, Steve Tarani. I've listened to him speak before, and he's a former, I think he was in the Secret Service and done lots of things. He's very skilled in terms of self-defense skills. With a gun, with a knife in particular, is one of his sort of areas of expertise. And even non-armed self-defense. But those are the kind of folks that are there that you can go and listen to for an hour or two and get a lot out of it. And that's what I think the real value is, other than networking with folks of like mind. But that's one of the big values of the NRA annual meeting, is the education that goes on there.
Now, lots of our listeners will be familiar with sort of the turmoil that the NRA has been experiencing because of mismanagement by its current leadership and now former leadership, with Wayne LaPierre. But it's still a great event, and we'd still encourage you to go. We hope that there are some significant changes made with respect to the leadership. In fact, there may be some changes made during the meeting or after the meeting.
After the meeting, yeah.
So in fact, and I'll mention this now, if you've been a lifetime member of the NRA, a 5-year member, or an annual member for 5 consecutive years, you're eligible to vote in the NRA Board of Directors election. And I've had Jeff Knox on the show previously to talk about his run for NRA Board of Directors and his what he calls the 4 for reform, which are the 4 candidates who are really pushing reform of the NRA, who are pushing for a smaller board of directors, who are pushing for more accountability, more transparency, et cetera. So,
and what we mean by that is that the NRA will actually be accountable to its board, and more importantly, through the board, the folks that are running the NRA will be accountable to the membership.
Yeah.
That's what we're talking about. And I think I'm sorry to interrupt, but I think before, if you're not going to, you've posted, everybody gets this NRA. If you're a life member or above, you get maybe actually below that membership levels. But if you're a life member and above, they put a ballot in your paper magazine that you get. Most folks will already have those, have gotten those in the mail. But Alex has posted previously our recommendations and Neil Knox's recommendations.
Jeff Knox.
Jeff Knox, I'm sorry, in terms of who to vote for and who not to vote for. And keep in mind that when you vote, I can't remember how many people you can vote for. It's a lot. But instead of diluting your vote and voting for too many people, our recommendation and Jeff Knox's recommendation is to vote for just a very few people. So I don't know if you can bring that.
Yeah, it's called bullet voting, where you only vote for these four candidates to increase the odds that they will get elected.
Doesn't dilute your vote, so to speak, is the way I think about it.
Yeah, and he talks about, I've got the article pulled up here on Jeff Knox's website, firearmscoalition.org. I'll link to this website as well as the interview that I recorded with Jeff Knox. And the four for reform, he's lists here are Judge Phil Journey, Rocky Marshall, Dennis Fusaro, and of course himself, Jeff Knox. And he talks about all of these folks in the episode that I recorded with him previously, which I'll link to in the show notes.
And I don't know if he did or you recommended from Detroit. Goodness.
Oh, this was John Richardson. He also voted for Rick Ector, who most people know because of his event that he does every year called the Legally Armed in Detroit, where he brings in instructors from around the country. I was one of them last year, as a matter of fact, and train 1,500 women or thereabouts in basic firearms handling and safety and marksmanship. It's a great event. And John Richardson, who runs the No Lawyers, Only Guns and Money blog, voted for the four for reform plus Rick Ector. So take it for, you can go and read about why he did that. I'll link to his blog in the show notes as well.
But if you're eligible to vote, that paper, and it's a sort of, I don't know, it's a cheap, ugly kind of paper that is in your NRA, what is it, Rifleman, Hunter, whatever those NRA magazines that they send out. But it's in there, and you have to go through the instructions. It takes a little work, but please do it because it will change the nature of the NRA for the good if these folks are elected.
Well, and you'll see here, I'm sharing multiple web pages here if you're watching this podcast by video. One of the pages that I have pulled up right now is John Richardson's blog. Again, he says here, NRA ballots due in 1 month, but that was March 28th. So they're due. They must be received April 28th. So it's in advance of the NRA annual meeting in May. So make sure that if you want to get involved, very low percentage of members actually vote in the NRA elections. So your vote can have a difference, right? I mean, the NRA is a large organization, but a very small percentage of people actually vote. So make sure that if you are eligible to vote, you make your vote count and send in your ballot. The last thing I want to mention, I'll go back to the NRA Annual Meeting tab here. We were talking about educational content. If you go to the NRA Annual Meeting website, which is just nraam.org, you can see they have a menu with seminar schedule, seminar speakers, etc. So there's a lot to do about the celebrity appearances. I've never been to one of the celebrity appearances, but the educational content is fantastic at the NRA Annual Meeting. So it's worth going for that alone. And it's free if you're already an NRA member. So you have to be an annual member, which I think is still $35 to be a member.
I don't know.
I don't actually know that for sure, but it's around $35. And you get into the convention and you get access to all this educational content. So, and if you're already a member, there's no additional fee. Okay.
Yeah. Of course, you got to get to Dallas and get a hotel, but it's, and we've been to Dallas before where it's there, and Dallas is a great forum for this to occur.
Yeah. And if you can't go this year, you know about it now. Make sure you make plans to go next year. Keep an eye out
I don't know where it's at.
I don't remember what the location is next year, but they move around. Last year it was in Indianapolis. It's been in Nashville and St. Louis and Houston and various other places. Atlanta. So keep an eye out for where it might be next year. All right, Mike. Well, I think that's where we'll leave it for now. Anything else you wanted to mention before we close up?
Yeah. I mean, we talked a lot about the NRA. You went to a fundraiser for basically local programs last night for the NRA, Friends of the NRA. But folks, please don't forget about Gun Owners of America and Firearms Policy Coalition. I know Doris and I, we give to Firearms Policy Coalition each and every month. Those are the folks out there. We didn't talk about it today, but there's still a whole lot going on in the courts. Those folks are at the front line of the judicial battle, and we need to support them so that they can fight off some of these tyrannical things that the Biden administration and others like the Biden administration at the state level are trying to do to us.
Yeah. So Firearms Policy Coalition, Gun Owners of America, Second Amendment Foundation, they're doing lots of great work in the courts, a lot of the heavy lifting with respect to the litigation, fighting the measures that lots of these progressive states, cities, et cetera, are taking to try to limit the right to keep and bear arms. So, like Mike said, definitely check out those organizations, support them if you can, support all of them if you can, but at least get behind one of them to help keep our rights, because a right, a freedom, a liberty that's lost is nearly impossible to get back. So fight to keep those liberties. All right, Mike, anything else you'd like to say before we close up?
I think I'm good. Thank you.
All right, I'm going to close up here with a quote from St. George Tucker. He says, "The right of self-defense is the first law of nature. In most governments, it has been the study of rulers to confine this right within the narrowest limits possible. Wherever standing armies are kept up, and the right of the people to keep and bear arms is, under any color or pretext whatsoever, prohibited, liberty, if not already annihilated, is on the brink of destruction." And that goes back, obviously, to the topic we've been talking about, we began with today, with the too much self-defense argument, that these government officials want to confine the right of self-defense within the narrowest limits possible.
And we'll get to talk about it a little more next week with Kamala Harris and Joe Biden's National Extreme Risk Protection Order Resource Center. When the federal government has a new entity with such a long name, be wary.
And such a friendly sounding name.
Oh,
you can almost guarantee
that it's tyrannical,
that it's terrible for freedom.
Yeah.
All right, Mike, thanks for coming along again this week. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed the show. I hope you learned a little something. If you did, don't forget to like and subscribe. As always, you can find us on YouTube, Rumble, Facebook, and all the most popular podcast streaming platforms. You can also find us at forgeoffreedom.com, where we post all these episodes along with the show notes and other content. You can also find me on X at Forge of Freedom. Thanks, everybody, and until next time, remember, you are the Forge of Freedom.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Forge of Freedom. Be sure to subscribe wherever you heard this podcast so you never miss a future episode. For more information or to connect with Alex, you can go to forgeoffreedom.com or follow him on Twitter at Forge of Freedom. Until next time, remember, you are the Forge of Freedom.